Welcome to the Apex Sunday podcast, co-hosted by myself, Robert Ross, and John Dowsett. And this time we're talking about the Austrian Grand Prix for MotoGP. And John, how are you doing?
I'm doing wonderfully.
Oh, that's good. So before we get into the actual race itself, let's talk about the news. And in the news, we have three major signings, I guess we could say. Ayogura from Moto2 is going to Trackhouse, replacing Miguel Oliveira, who we believe is going to go to Pramac for Yamaha. We've got Morbidelli at VR46, moving from Pramac to the VR46 team, only for 1 year, though. So that's somewhat interesting. He's a VR46 Academy rider, but I think that the excuse that he didn't have preseason testing is kind of gone now, and he's on a 2024 Ducati, and the performance isn't quite there yet. So I wonder if they've only signed him for 1 year because of that, but we'll see. And then also from Moto2, Fermin Aldeguer is coming up to Gresini to replace Marc Marquez. He's signed directly with Ducati, so Ducati pays his wage, but they're placing him at Gresini. So be interesting to see some more rookies in the series. We only had Pedro this year. There was some concern about the low crowd sizes in England and Austria. So that's probably something to do with looking to Liberty Media to increase the promotion of the sport. And Jack Miller, to his credit, says he doesn't want to be in MotoGP based on his passport. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. And finally, Thailand is going to host the opening races for the next 2 seasons at the Buriram circuit. And I'll mention it is a street circuit. Formula One, you don't have to go. Sorry, it is a proper circuit. Formula One, you don't have to make a street circuit in Thailand. Kind of sick of the street circuits.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
I think there's some coming up in the Formula One calendar, I believe. So,
well, I always considered them to be sort of just all not even a real race. It's almost like it's an exhibition. But that's just me.
Like Monaco, the exception, obviously, and I didn't mind Singapore as a decent street race. The rest, not very good. So, anyways,
and then there's the Island
circuit. Well, yeah, that's a bit crazy, isn't it?
Yes.
But anyways, the Buriram circuit is a really nice circuit in Thailand, so it's good that they're opening there the next 2 years. So let's move on to qualifying. So in qualifying, I don't have too much to say. I did enjoy, again, as I always do, seeing the bikes move around. Morbidelli had that incident at turn 4 that was pretty violent, but he didn't crash. The thing that stood out to me was Pol Espargaro coming into KTM again to test the upgrades, mostly for next season. Pol used to ride for them, but he had a terrible, terrible injury last season at the first race, which basically ended his MotoGP career. He did come back a little bit, but he had his jaw sewed shut for a month, so he couldn't eat for a month. His cervix was cracked, so he actually reduced in size by a centimeter or so in height. So really impressed to see him recover from all that and come back and ride the bike. So, these guys are pretty extraordinary in terms of athleticism, which I think people miss out. When you're a racer, in most forms of racing, you have to be super, super fit, don't you?
Yes. I agree with you in watching the bikes move around, and I think it's something we don't see so much in the race when these guys are going over the limit. I mean, it's just phenomenal watching them pedal those bikes around. It's staggering.
Yeah, absolutely. And Fabio Quartararo, I noted, looked very, very frustrated. So he's continuing on with Yamaha, but I'll remind everyone that for me personally, after Mark comes Fabio. It's just kind of sad to see him at the back all the time. And I'm going to miss Simon Crafar. I found his commentary during the qualifying to be really informative, to understand what the challenges are that they're facing through the qualifying and the race. So hopefully they replace him with someone equally as good as taking the audience through what they're going through on the street on the circuit. So I'm going to miss him. And I did note also that Mark, he did get on the front row on the 2023, but he was 5/10ths back on this circuit, which is really, really big. And that's probably
Huge.
why it was a bit of a boring race. Pecco on the front row again. This guy is just consistent beyond belief.
Yeah.
And Martin's always very fast, so he got it. The pole position. Again, to me, you take all your talent, all your determination, all your work. None of it works unless you're consistent. Like, consistency is the thing that you need to do to win championships and win races. So Pecco is just, I think, the most consistent rider in MotoGP at the moment. And he's got challenging opponents. Martin is not slow. Bastianini suffered a little bit. We'll talk about that later. But once again, Pecco is really, really impressing me. Anything else about qualifying for you, John?
Not at all, other than probably my favorite part about this whole event.
This
Yeah.
I would agree. So let's move on to the sprint. So for the sprint, great racing at the beginning between Martin and Pecco, which is kind of the opposite of what we're used to. And for me, the thing that stood out for the sprint was Martin's long lap penalty. So he went off by the chicane. He lost a position. He didn't gain a position. But Pecco said that he noted the gap after he saw that and said it was 0.3, so 0.3, and he knew that Martin would be penalized because he didn't drop back in 1 second. Now, I still think it's very, very hard for the rider to time that. They have no radio, pit to radio kind of thing. So, and the fact that he lost his position, I think that's enough of a penalty.
Absolutely.
I have heard people argue that the reason they do the penalty is because they've changed the circuit so that the riders are safer. So in the past, if he had gone off, regardless of him losing that one position this time, he would have been in the gravel, would have lost a lot more time. So that's why they have this type of penalty. So logically, I guess that makes sense. Although it's sort of this sort of virtual, like, it used to be this way, so we're penalizing you for the way it used to be. It's just, I don't know. They've got to do something about this, I think.
Well, look at the pain that comes out of such a penalty is immense, and that's what a penalty is. So,
yeah, that's true.
If you're going to make a mistake like that, you should be penalized.
Right. I guess then the problem is, how do you get the rider to drop back a second when they have no? It's not like F1 where they have a dashboard with all this information on pits to radio. So they've got to figure out how to fix this somehow. I don't know how, but I think they need to do that, because it's rather unfortunate. I mean, it didn't really affect Martin's position, obviously, in the end, but still a little bit odd. And Martin said he understood getting the penalty, but he also said this needs to be clarified, and it's a bit confusing and difficult to implement. So hopefully that.
Well, it's sort of like figure skating, isn't it? I mean, it's judged. It's not. It's not something that is cut in stone. Just give them a 1 second penalty. I know that is not great for the spectators, but there has to be a way around it. I agree with you. There has to be a way around the penalties and making them more succinct, so you know what's going to happen.
Yes, and some way for the rider to figure out how to drop back a second. Maybe like give them a couple laps to do it, but then that might affect position. So it's not easy, but
no,
it's a little unfortunate, And then, of course, Marquez falling again, said he was a bit too optimistic. Again, he took fault for the fall. I remember, was it last season that Charles Leclerc was on pole at Monaco
Hmm.
after he had crashed in qualifying?
Hmm.
And their argument was, well, we could fix his car, but that'll have a penalty. And I argued then, well, don't just put it out there. Ferrari had very little chance of success at that time, so just put it out there and go for it. He did. I believe Leclerc's car did not finish that race.
No, it did not.
So I think Mark,
Excuse me.
no problem, but I
I
think
th-
Mark going for it at this point, he's not going to win the championship, so why not try?
well, he
That's
doesn't
what
know
I
how to
thought.
drive slow. He doesn't know how to ride slowly, does he? So, and thinks he belongs at the front. He does belong at the front, but he doesn't have the bike to do it. So, I was shocked at how quick he was, and watching his bike versus the two bikes he was behind.
Yes.
He was definitely ringing. He's doing qualifying lap after qualifying lap on that thing.
Yeah, I believe he's finding out that he can't manipulate this bike quite as much as he could the Honda, because this race in the past was notorious for last lap, last corner deciders, all with this guy named Mark Marquez.
Yeah,
Well, and Ducatis, and he was the only rider who could keep up with them. The other Hondas were way back, and all the other bikes were way back. So, yeah, he's just. I wasn't surprised he crashed. I kind of figured he was trying to win, and he crashed. So, what can you do?
yeah. Well, I think he was
Yeah.
trying to podium. I don't think he had much chance of winning, but
Well, he
I think he
thought that
probably
the
knew that.
gap was coming down. He thought he might have a chance in the sprint at least.
Right.
But saying all that, the rider of the sprint for me is Pecco. He got ahead of Martin at the beginning and just made sure he won.
Disappeared.
Yeah. And I'm going
Yes.
to rate it a 4. What about yourself?
Uh, a solid 2.5, and just for those few laps of Marquez giving her, I'm going to have to give it to Marquez, because
Okay.
the other guys just had big bikes. They had the power. They did what any other rider would do, almost.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So let's move on to the race. So we've both already alluded to the fact that the race was pretty boring, and there's lots of talk about how, like, I've watched other podcasts and read the news, and everyone's in crisis, like, oh my God, what's going on here? We had a
Yeah.
bad race, but it happens. And I guess the point is, Mark again at the beginning. So what had happened is a valve had failed on his front tire. So they had to rapidly replace the tire. It was unheated. So he tried to heat it during the warm up lap. And you engage the starting device by braking hard and sort of pushing it into activation. And other riders said they barely got theirs working as well. So Mark failed to activate the starting device, and so he had a bad start. And that basically was the end of a fight for victory or a fight for podiums in this race, as
Mhm.
far as I'm concerned. Um, and he had that contact with Morbidelli too, so that put him way back to 14th, 13th by the end of the first lap. And so for me, the highlights of this race were Mark from 13th to 4th, Binder from 12th to 5th, and Morbidelli from 17th to 8th.
Phenomenal.
But
Phenomenal.
We didn't see Binder or Morbidelli footage. We saw
Yeah.
some Mark,
Mhm.
but again, out front, Pecco made sure, like, Martin and him were racing at the beginning, and Pecco got ahead and disappeared again. So great ride from Pecco. Martin did what he could, but he admitted he wasn't as fast. And I was a little surprised about Enea being so far back, but the point is, he pointed out that this is a circuit where it's point, break, shoot, right? There's no long curves, or there's maybe 2 long corners. So his advantage is on preserving the sidewall of the tires compared to the other riders. And there was no preservation of sidewall of the tires for this race. So once again, it's a mixture of all the technical aspects of the bikes, the strength and weaknesses of the riders combined with the type of circuit it is, and it conspired to make the worst race of this season.
Well, it wasn't an exciting race, but there was some great riding.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So there isn't a ton of passing.
No.
That's going to happen every now and again.
Yes.
I'm curious as to see. I'm already thinking about next year and what's going to happen next year. But there has
Yeah.
to be some way of getting all the bikes a little bit closer instead of having two classes, which they currently have.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everyone complained about the start device because of the problem Mark had. And Mark said, "Well, they shouldn't change the rule just because of me. Everyone has problems with this." But I can't wait for 2027 when there's none of these devices on the bikes. And that kind of leads to the central discussion topic. But before that, I'm going to say again, Pecco was supremely good.
Mm-hmm.
Binder was good. Acosta, great at the beginning of the season. He's having the rookie doldrums. And I think that's a case of as the bike changes and evolves throughout the season, the experienced riders like Brad adapt to it a little bit better. So Acosta just had one of his bad races. Rider of the race for me is Pecco again, and I'm going to give it a rating of 3 because it lacked excitement. But I agree with you. There were some, even it wasn't exciting, the way they rode was optimal. And that's kind of one of the reasons it wasn't exciting. Right. What about yourself?
I'll give it a 5 just for watching the riding. I would like to take, excuse me, I'd like to take about, I'm going to make it a 2 because the coverage sucked.
Right. Yeah.
But it was great, still great, to watch. It was the qualifying that made it. And there is no real rider at the race for me. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So no, seriously. Pecco. Yeah. If you have to choose.
He's very, again, Prost-like, isn't he? Like precision. You don't see him. The bike is just smooth as can be. He's just very, very impressive. He's got that bike right down, and it's inconsistent. Yeah. And so again, we see a lot of articles about, will Mark upset the balance at Ducati next season? I don't think Pecco's weak that way or will be affected that much. I don't think Mark will care to play games and so forth. I think they'll just do their best and we'll see what happens. I hope that's the case. But I'm grateful that Ducati is willing to have 2 of the absolute top riders in the same team. That's for the fans. That's what we need.
Yes.
And so we look forward to the next race, and hopefully it's a bit better than this one. And I'll talk to you then, John.
Thanks, and I'll try and shave before the next one. Thanks, Rob.
Okay. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.